got down towards the end over here of the second paragraph. Here, it's interesting. We're back to the same concept. It's repeating itself from the first paragraph into the second paragraph, because of its incredible importance. It says, "V'limadatem otam et b'neichem ledaber bom b'shivtecha b'beitecha v'leftecha v'derecha v'shalpecha v'kamecha," that we have to teach it to our children. Right, which means it's not enough for us to do it, but we've got to give it over to our children as well. How are we supposed to do that? Again, by personal example. So the more we show them that we're doing it, the better it's going to be. "Uchasavtam amuzuzot beitecho uvisharecho leman yebu yemechem v'yimei b'neichem al adam asher nishba Hashem al avatechem latet lehem kimei hashamayim al haaretz." And at the end, the paragraph says that if we do all of this, then we'll be able to live long lives in this land over here. And us and our children, which means that what God is teaching us is something pretty fundamental. He's telling us that our being here in the land of Israel is dependent upon our doing what we're supposed to do. We don't have some kind of inalienable right to be here regardless. Rather, we're here because we're supposed to be doing the will of God. If we don't do the will of God, then the right to be here will be taken away and we'll be sent off into exile again. That's exactly what happened over all the generations, right? We started off with coming into the land of Israel and the building of the first temple. And of course, when things started spiraling out of control, so the first temple was destroyed, we were exiled, and then we came back again and the second temple was built. And the same thing happened again. We're pretty consistent, we do what we're supposed to do for a little bit, and then we start unraveling. And the destruction of the second temple led to exiles, and the Jews being spread all over the world through various different exiles. And in the meantime, we're still waiting to come back in spiritual terms to be able to back here, to be able to build the temple, which means that Baruch Hashem, we are back here physically. That's good. Hopefully that's the beginning of the whole process that's going to bring us back to bring us back to the building of the temple and to the Messianic era. But in the meantime, we've also got to, now that we're here, we've got to do what we're supposed to do. Right? Nothing's changed, which means that just because we're here, it doesn't mean we've reached wherever we need to reach, and now that's it, we're done. But rather, now that we're here, I guess we have to try even harder. Now that we're back in the land of Israel, we've got to try even harder to be able to to put things back on track. The land of Israel is a pretty fascinating place. I don't know if you know your history at all, but after the dispersion, the second exile, after the destruction of the second temple, the land of Israel became pretty desolate. And it remained desolate until the end of the 1800s, when the Jews started coming back into what was called the first Aliyah. And they started establishing little communities. But up until then, that the land of Israel was pretty sparse. There were nomadic Arab tribes that were wandering around over here with their flocks of goats. Goats are pretty destructive animals, actually. One of the reasons why the land of Israel was so desolate was because they brought their goats and they would give them to eat whatever was there. The problem with goats is that they when they eat, they uproot what it is that they're eating. Other animals just eat, they'll clean off whatever's there on top of the surface, and the roots will remain, which means that the roots can regenerate and they can regrow. Goats are extremely strong, and by their eating method was to uproot whatever was there, and of course no one was regrowing anything, no one was reseeding, which means that the land of Israel was very desolate. And the Jews came back. When we came back at the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, at that point things started changing a little bit, and we started rejuvenating the land. It started to produce again, and today it's unbelievable. What the state of Israel looks like today is something extraordinary. It really is. Within the space of 65 years, to turn what was basically an uninhabitable piece of almost completely desert land into what it is today is absolutely astonishing. And a little bit of Jewish know-how to harness solar energy and to introduce drip irrigation to hold on to every drop of water, because every drop of water is precious over here. All of these things that we've managed to do, the Jewish nation has managed to do in order to build up the country and turn it into something fantastic. David Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister of the state of Israel, His dream was to greenify the desert areas down in the south. That was his dream. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to turn the desert into a blooming garden. It hasn't been done yet, but hopefully it will happen at some point. Although I don't know, ecologically we need to worry what happens when you turn a desert into something. I mean, desert's there for a reason as well, but whatever, I guess we'll find out when it gets done. But the idea, that was David Ben-Gurion's dream at that point, 65 years ago. That's what it was. It was just a dream. That's all it was. No one thought for 1 minute that it was really going to happen. But now, with the advent of all kinds of technological advancements, it's definitely possible that these things can be done. And Mitzvah Hashem, well, maybe we'll be able to witness that happening. The regrowth and the rebirth of not just the Jewish nation inside of the land of Israel, but the land itself is also going to start producing in a way that it hasn't produced up until now. Mitzvah Hashem, we shall be able to see that. That's what the second paragraph of the Shema is saying, though, is that it's dependent upon us, which means that if we do, second paragraph of the Shema, do with Kabbalat all mitzvot, accepting upon ourselves the yoke of the mitzvot. So if we do what God wants us to do, then the land of Israel will produce. If we don't do what God wants us to do, then unfortunately the land is not going to do what it's supposed to do, because it's entirely dependent. There's a very beautiful idea. The sages say, the brachot, the blessings of the land of Israel, are all hidden away. They've got to be. You can't. Many countries have blessings. They have commodities that are just easy to get a hold of. So some countries are blessed with oil, and some countries are blessed with cocoa beans, and some countries are blessed with diamonds and gold, and you name it. Over here, the only commodity that Israel has is falafel balls, which is it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't seen on the commodity markets. I haven't seen futures in falafel balls. Maybe somebody here knows. Huh?
Coming up.
It's coming out. Yeah. The sooner the better, huh?
It's coming. Yeah.
Good. And so actually, somebody once told me that the best falafel he's ever eaten in his life was in Chicago, that's pretty sad, I think, right?
I feel the same about New York.
What?
I feel the same about New York.
Yeah.
That was the best. Yeah.
Okay, here you go. Of course, here this area of the world is the originator of the falafel ball. But if you want to get the best falafel ball in the world, you got to go all the way off to North America somewhere. That's pretty sad. But what's the idea? The idea is that the land of Israel is truly blessed. It really is. But the blessings, the physical blessings of the land of Israel, are dependent upon spiritual effort. The more spiritual effort we put in, the greater the blessing is going to be, and the greater is the blessing that we're going to see it. We'll see it clearly, right, as we see it now today. It really is something extraordinary to see what's going on over here, in the way that land is being used for agriculture, and land is being used for building, and it's just it's a miracle. There's no other way to describe it. So that's the second paragraph of the Shema. The third paragraph of the Shema is going to talk about mitzvah. It's going to focus mostly on the mitzvah of tzitzit. Right, wearing a four-cornered garment, having strings that are attached to the four-cornered garments, and at the end it will talk about the exodus from Egypt, because really everything that we have revolves around the concept of coming out of Egypt. We came out of Egypt, we became a nation. Once we became a nation, we became obligated in the mitzvahs. So that's all. It's all going to tie in. But it says like this: Vayom Hashem el Moshe lemor dabel bnei Yisrael v'amat alehem v'asu lahem tzitzit. You have to make tzitzit. Right, what are tzitzit? Al kanfei bigdeim ladorotam. So v'natnu tzitzit al kanaf p'tul tchelet. So what have we got to do? You've got a four-cornered garment, and you need to put strings on it. Now, what's a four-cornered garment? I don't know. It can be all kinds of things, actually. The standard, a four-cornered garment could be a blanket that gets worn. That's got four corners to it. A poncho, right? If anybody here walks around with a poncho, so what is it? It's just a blanket with a hole in the middle, right? I mean, that's a pretty standard piece of equipment down in that. Where ponchos come from? South America, right?
The Americas.
Yeah. What?
The Americas in general.
The Americas in general, okay, whatever. Native Americans, right? And then South America, and so if a Jew is going to wear a poncho, he needs to be concerned that it needs to have tzitzit on the four corners. Right? If he doesn't want to put tzitzit on them, then he needs to cut one of the corners to make sure there's. Once you've got more than four corners, you don't have an obligation anymore. It's got to have only four corners, right? So if you snip off the end of one of the corners, you've now just created two more corners, so now you've got 5 corners instead of 4, and you're not obligated anymore in the mitzvah of putting on tzitzit. In the olden days, going back certainly into biblical times, certainly into Talmudic times as well, people didn't wear tzitzit like we wear tzitzit today. Right? They had these large, I guess, talit-like things, blanket-like things, which they would wear as a piece of clothing, and they would put tzitzit on them. As the styles began to change, and as that became a less usual thing for people to wear, so the Jews decided that they were going to create something called a talit katan, which was going to be something that they would wear on purpose in order to be able to put on tzitzit. Now it's interesting, tzitzit is what's called a mitzvah kiyumit, which means if you've got a 4-cornered garment, you're obligated to wear tzitzit, but you're not obligated to put on a 4-cornered garment. Right? There is no biblical obligation that we have to wear tzitzit. Rather, if you're going to wear a 4-cornered garment, you need to put on tzitzit. At some point in history, and this is going back quite a while. I hope there wasn't anything. No, okay. We're going back a long time already. I don't know when exactly, but maybe 2,000 years, 1,800 years ago, the Jews decided that they were going to deliberately put on a 4-cornered garment in order to have the obligation to wear tzitzit, and that's where we are today. Today, right, a person should be wearing tzitzit, and what do? You can buy these things all over the place, but it's really just a rectangular piece of cloth. It's got a hole in the middle to be able to put your head through it. And on the corners, which are normally reinforced to be able to put the strings on it, you've got the strings that have to be tied on. Well, what are the strings comprised of? So they're comprised of 4 very long strings. Each corner has 4 very long strings that go through a hole, and then they're folded around on themselves. So you end up with 8 strings hanging down from each corner, comprised of 4 very long. The original strings are 4 very long bits of string. And then they're tied up in various ways. Now again, depending on what custom you come from, depending on what congregation you belong to, depends on what kind of tying system you're going to have around your tzitzit. Whatever you've got, it's fine. Some people they tie their tzitzit according to the numerical value of God's name. So there's a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, which is 10 and 5 and 6 and 5, and they put a knot in between each series of windings in order to make a differentiation between them. The standard Ashkenazi approach is to have 7, 8, 11, 13. You'll see all kinds of interesting ways of doing it. Whatever you do, it's going to be fine. Really, however you wear your tzitzit, it's going to be okay. What is fascinating is like this. There are all different kinds of reasons what the tzitzit represents. But one of the explanations, which I feel is very, very, very beautiful, I think it's something which is very pertinent to all of us actually, is the idea that the tzitzit, you've got the beged, you've got the vest, and you've got the tzitzit that are knotted up. And then after the final knot, there's always a lot of tzitzit that's left. The strings are left, right, just hanging down. I don't know if anyone can see over here. I know I put them on this morning. What have they got? But you've got here. I'm going to stand up for a minute. But you've got over here, you've got the knots going down, and then you've got a whole series of strings that are hanging free. And so one of the explanations is something very beautiful. Is that Judaism is a very defined religion. We spoke about this once before. Everything is there inside of the halakha, inside of the law. Everything is defined, which means that you've got to do something. You do it within a certain amount of time. It's got to be done in a certain way. If you need to make kiddush, for example, so you need to drink a certain amount of the wine in order to be able to fulfill your obligation. It's a very, very defined religion. However, what the tzitzit are representing is the knots to the bottom of the knot. That's the more rigid dimension, and then the strings flow out. Right? There's a certain sense of freedom over there, which means even though the strings themselves are connected back into the knots, back into that more rigid part, nevertheless, the ability to express your individuality is definitely there. The ability for you to worship God in the way that's good for you, in the way to serve God in the way that's good for you, so long as it's all coming from within Jewish law, the ability is there for everybody. I think it's a very beautiful idea, I really do. The sages say like this, that the word tzitzit is spelled tzadi yud taf. Does anybody here know anything about numerical values? What's called gematria. Every letter's got a numerical value. So to say the sages like this, the word tzitzit, a tzadi is 90 and yud is 10. How much is that together?
100.
Whoa, that is a college education. No one else got it, you saw that.
Apparently, yeah.
Phew. It's going to get hard though, hold on. Okay? So it's tzadi yud is 100. And then there's another tzadi and another yud, which is how much?
Another 100.
Another 100. So what is 100 plus another 100?
200.
This guy is flying. 200, and then a taf on the end is worth 400. So 400 plus 200. I'm sorry to do this, Joe, I really am, but you can see that nobody else is holding where you are.
You're really putting me on the spot here. I believe it's 600.
600, right? Says that gematria, the numerical value of tzitzit is 600. There are 8 strings on each corner, so that's 608. Even I can do that bit, that's okay, right? Plus 5 knots, which is how much? 608 plus 5?
Carry the 2, that's 613.
613, right? There are 613 mitzvot. So say the stage is like this. A person is overwhelmed. What are your tzitzit supposed to do? They're supposed to stop you from sinning. A person is overwhelmed with the desire to do something they're not supposed to do. So they look at their tzitzit and they'll say to themselves, hold on a second, tzitzit. It's only going to work if you're you. If you're me and you're mathematically challenged, you may come out with the wrong number altogether. Right? But if you follow the numbers properly, you'll say tzitzit. Hold on a second. The gematria of tzitzit is 600, and there are 8 strings, it's 608, and there are 5 knots, which is 613. Oh, wait a second. There are 613 mitzvot, right? Maybe I shouldn't do what I'm about to do. Does that sound a little far-fetched to people? Again, I guess it means that if you want to be an upstanding Jew, you need to walk around with a pocket calculator on you, right? Just to make sure, because I'm telling you, otherwise you're okay, but I'm not. Maths and I don't get on very well together. So what are you supposed to do? Says the Mishnah something else altogether. There's a Mishnah which says, we'll talk about it in Mitzvah Hashem, not today, then next week, but that there's supposed to be a blue thread that runs through the tzitzit. So the Mishnah says that when a person is overwhelmed with a desire to sin, he should look at his tzitzit, he'll see the blue, and he'll say, wow, blue, hold on a second. Oh, the sea is blue. And then he'll say, hold on, the sky is blue. And then he'll say, sure, 1 minute, sapphire is blue. And then he'll say, hold on, the throne of God is made out of sapphire. And then he'll say, God, maybe I shouldn't do this. Does this sound something which is practical to everybody? Is this, which either you have to play word association game or you have to start adding things up, right? But either way, it all sounds rather odd, no?
I mean, there's a lot of other things that you have to kind of accept along the way that make this seem like just par for the course.
Okay. All right. So you're saying that if it's odd, then that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And presumably the odder the better, because that means that that's really orthodox. If it's really odd, then it's really orthodox. I think the rabbis are saying something else altogether, actually, which is like this: that when a person is overwhelmed with a desire to sin, the first thing they should do to try to combat that desire is stop and think. I don't think the rabbis are telling you that you've got to start adding up the numerical value of the word tzitzit and adding on the knots and adding on the strings in the hope that you're going to get to 613, right? I really don't think the rabbis are saying you're supposed to stand over there in McDonald's, about to order a triple cheeseburger and look at your tzitzit and say, well, hold on a second, blue, blue, sea, sky, sapphire, throne of God, God. Okay, you know what? Maybe I'll go to the local kosher restaurant instead. I don't think that's not what the rabbis are saying. The rabbis are saying like this: the only way to combat wanting to do something that you shouldn't do is to stop and think about it. For how badly do I want to do this? It's a trade-off. We all know that, right? It's the same with everything, right? If we spoke before about the idea of eating a healthy lifestyle, yeah, which means a person knows that they're not supposed to have that piece of cake. It would be better for them to have a piece of fruit, right? But the piece of cake is a lot more enticing right now. The question is how much thought do I need to put into this to realize that I should be taking the more healthy option? That's what it comes down to, right? Some people are blessed with the ability to not have to work very hard at all to overcome that desire to eat the cake, and they'll go for the fruit. Other people, they have to work very hard, and very often they don't succeed. Right? In the end, it's a piece of cake that's beckoning to them, and so they end up eating the piece of cake instead of having the piece of fruit. In the spiritual realms, it's exactly the same. It really is. The spiritual realms are telling us, that the physical world is a very seductive place. We all know that. There's lots of wonderful things over here in the physical world that they're very enjoyable and they're delicious, right? The question is, yes or no? Am I allowed to have them, or am I not allowed to have them? So the only way to be able to overcome that desire to have something on the spur of the moment, to have that thing, is to stop and think. That's what the rabbis are teaching us. The tzitzit are there to teach us that we have to think. Again, are they a guarantee? They're not a guarantee, which means that a person may end up thinking long and hard, and in the end, he'll have that piece of cake anyway, right? That person may end up thinking long and hard and going through the whole rigmarole of word association and the calculations, the mathematical calculations, and end up eating the cheeseburger anyway. That comes down to the individual. I always say like this, there's something called the Yetzer Hara. What's your Yetzer Hara? Your evil inclination. I think calling it an evil inclination is a little bit, it puts people off, because then they imagine that it's not really anything to do with them, because we don't look at ourselves as being evil. But it's that part of us which drives us on to do things that we're not supposed to do. I always describe the Yetzer Hara as being like a spiritual credit card. What is a credit card? Somebody once described a credit card as being something that you use to buy. You buy something with money that you don't have. Yet you buy something you don't want with money that you don't have to impress people that you don't like. That's the function of a credit card. What does a credit card do? A credit card allows you to buy things when you don't have the money right now. It allows you to buy it in the hope that next month you'll be able to pay off whatever it is that needs to be paid off. That in a certain way, the Yetzer Hara is a spiritual credit card. What's it saying? It's saying to you, here, have it now, enjoy it now, and we'll be happy to make a payment schedule. You can pay this off for eternity. It's fine, really. Whatever it is that you've wanted to do, you can do it now. You can get the enjoyment of it right now. Enjoy every single second of it. And afterwards, when a person reaches the spiritual realms after leaving this physical world, then they'll end up having to, pay off a very hefty payment schedule in order to be able to undo what's been done. That's really what drives us as a rule. If you think about it carefully, what drives us to do things that we're not supposed to do is the immediate satisfaction. Right? You don't see people battling with themselves to not to eat that bowl of salad, but for some reason you got to battle with yourself not to eat that chocolate mousse, right? Because it's all about immediate satisfaction, something which is good, something which is enjoyable. Right? Again, if you stop and think about it, many sins that we trip up on the way in our lives are things that are very enjoyable. That's what makes it so difficult. If sins were sort of nasty, horrible things, then people wouldn't sin as much as they do. But they're not. God's giving us a whole list of things that we can do, things that we can't do, and the things that we can't do very often are perfectly normative, normal, right? Which means that, again, we're not talking about things that are obviously wicked and things that are obviously evil. Good, okay. You don't want to react? Don't react. See if I care. And then it says you need to put on a thread of blue. Now this thread of blue is quite a fascinating thing. Where's it coming from? So the thread of blue comes from something called a chilazon. What is a chilazon? Well, we're not 100% sure anymore. Since the dispersion from the land of Israel, the recipe for being able to produce this blue dye has been lost. But it comes from some kind of a mollusk, some kind of a sea snail. There is actually there's an institution that's dedicated to trying to find out which exactly it is. I think they've narrowed it down now to 2 possible species of sea snails. And what is it? It's the blood of the snail has a blue dye. It's got a blue color, and you dye the string with that blue color, and that's where the tchelet comes from. Now there are all kinds of conditions over here, which means that if it's exposed to the sun, it's not supposed to lose the strength of its color. There are many, apparently, I'm not a big expert on this at all, but there are many possible candidates for the chilazon which do give a blue dye from their blood. They also give a blue dye, but the problem is that once it's exposed to sunlight, it fades almost immediately. This one is a special one. It doesn't fade. Like I said, I think they've narrowed it down to 2 different possibilities. The good news is, as far as we're concerned, the mitzvah of tzitzit is doable without the blue dye, which means that you can wear tzitzit, white strings, and you don't have to be concerned that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah in the correct way. There is a fascinating little insight, little tidbit of Jewish history. It says like this: before the Second World War, there was a Hasidic Rebbe who came from a place called Reuven. And the Rebbe of Reuven, he decided that he'd found the recipe for the tchelet, for this blue dye. And he started using it on his tzitzit, and his Hasidim started to use it on their tzitzit as well. And he went around the great rabbis of the generation, asking them to, showing them what it is that he's prepared, and asking them to sign that they think that this is the right one. And no one was prepared to do it. And one of the reasons was that inside of this concoction that was being made, he would put in a little bit of copper sulfate. Now, copper sulfate turns most things blue. So, whether what he was doing, whether this was right or it wasn't right, the minute you put copper sulfate in, then that doesn't fit the criteria of being tchelet. It's something which looks like tchelet, it's something which retains its color like tchelet is supposed to, but it doesn't fit the bill because it's got something added into it which is going to give it that blue color. The Chassidut of Reuven was wiped out during the war. They were almost completely decimated, and the Rebbe didn't survive. And with his death, the recipe that he used was seemingly lost. The few Hasidim that were left after the Second World War, they wanted to reintroduce the customs of the deceased Rebbe. So they decided that they wanted to start dyeing their tzitzit blue. It's not the whole tzitzit; it's just one thread that goes around the others. They wanted to reintroduce the custom of dyeing their tzitzit blue, but they didn't know how to do it because they didn't have the recipe. But they found out that there was somebody in Ireland, off the coast of England. The chief rabbi of Ireland was somebody called Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Herzog, who became the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. And he had the recipe. So they went and they asked him for the recipe. He gave them the recipe and they started wearing this blue thread. Why did he have the recipe? Because before the Second World War, he'd written his PhD thesis on techelet, on this blue thread. And inside of his thesis, he's proved that the recipe of the Admor Mirozhin, from the Rebbe from Rozhin, was not the right one. But he was the only one who still had it, so they went and they got it from him, and they colored their tzitzit using that. Today, if you go into any shop that sells tzitzit, you'll see that you can get white tzitzit, and you can get tzitzit with tchelet running through it as well. Is that the correct one? It's very possible that it is. Again, they've got it narrowed down to two different kinds of species. So, there's a 50-50 chance that it's the right one. However, you need to know that it's not obligatory. You don't have to do it. Which means that you can wear your tzitzit all white, and you're definitely fulfilling the obligation that way. And if you want, you can buy the tzitzit with a blue thread, and hopefully you're fulfilling the obligation exactly the way that the Torah tells you to fulfill it. But if not, so at least you're still fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzit. Good. I think we're going to stop over here. I have
a question about tzitzit.
Yeah.
When you're at home, do you wear?
Yeah. You're supposed to wear tzitzit all day. There is inside. It says over here, like a little bit later on in Mitzvah Shem, we'll look at it on Sunday. But it says Ureitem oto, that you should see them. So according to that, the sages learned that there is no obligation to wear tzitzit at night. But during the day, when you're at home, when you're out, it's something that is worn, should be worn the whole time. Today, as far as we're concerned, there is no, we don't make any real differentiation between night and day. And if you wear tzitzit, you should wear them at night, right? In the same way that you wear them during the day. If you're not wearing tzitzit, then I guess that gets rid of the problem, right? Good. Okay, we're gonna stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem. Everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos. Tomorrow's the best day of the week because I don't have to come in, right? And we will meet. I was going to say we'll meet up here, but we'll meet down here, right, on Sunday, as always. Right, bleary-eyed, hungover, wishing to be anywhere else but here. Yeah, good. Okay.